Welcome, Vibe Tribe. It's Wednesday night. I think everyone's good and fired up after the intro music. That's why I do the full 3 minutes, because it just gets us in the zone. We're ready. Got a really fun hang for everybody. Sophie Fletcher returns. We just had her on InnerVerse talking about human design, and we'll be down to Q&A more about that stuff. But we also brought around her significant other. I don't know if better half is the right word, Yerasimos, but other half.
Good half.
The other half.
Yerasimos, he's a co-host of Here for the Truth podcast. He's been with us before too. Both of these beautiful folks have been with us before. They are great friends of mine. I've seen them in real life. We've hugged each other and high-fived in person. So I know their vibe is totally appropriate for the Vibe Rant.
Yeah, dude. Really, and when I met you in person, man, I didn't realize you were like as tall as you were, man. That was wild.
There's a myth in the chat that I'm a giant.
You are a giant, dude. You're
think I'm just regular
giant
tall.
than me.
Awesome. I wanted to give a few shout outs to community members also, that while I have it on my mind. I don't have a P.O. box yet, but that's something I'm going to work on, because there are some of you out there that like to send nifty gifties in the analog style, and I love that. I appreciate that a lot. That is a cool way to support. So first, Stacy, got to give you a shout out. This isn't even the first time you've sent me something really kind, but check these out. These are called Ferro cylinders. Have you heard of these before? So this one is zinc and this one is copper. And you hold them in your fists, and the zinc is for the left hand, the copper is for the right hand. And those particular elements are keyed in to improve the conductivity of your whole body. Like, I've been holding them since the music started. I'm like starting to sweat. I can feel my power level rising like Goku. Yeah. So that's really cool. And then, so thanks for that. And she also sent me a really nice flower essence elixir. And that gets me going. It's a really powerful medicine. And then this nice card is from Lizzie. Thank you, Lizzie. Aww. And she also sent me some crystals that she dug herself, but they're so big I couldn't put them on my desk. So I'm not going to show those, but I do appreciate the gifts and all of the super chats and the supporters that join the premium membership. Every little bit is helpful. And I see you guys out there. I love you. So thank you for that. And where to get the ferro cylinders? I would just Google it. I don't know where she got them from, silly. But yeah, you guys, welcome. How you guys been?
It's good to be here, man. Well, I just want to give you a shout out too, dude. Like, just for who you are and how you present yourself and the community you've built, and just, being an individual that has, been out in the world and giving your gifts, man. And I just, it seems it's been almost 4 years, I think, since the first time we connected. I think when we came on your InnerVerse, I can't remember. It was in the beginning during all the craziness, like 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, we were both going on to Sarion's show.
Yeah,
I think that's how we became aware of each other. But yeah, it has been a while. And thank you for saying that. Here's Jenny just dug up the photo. This is why the myth of me being a giant is out there. This photo.
Bro, that's you? That's
just a very short lady. It's not that I'm that big.
I don't know. I mean, when we did meet you, we literally all, like, the two of us had a conversation where you were much taller than, for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, this is what's interesting, is that when we work online, and let's say we're on Zoom or whatever platform we're on, like, people have their ideas, especially how you come across. Dude, people, when they meet me in person, I've had like 50 people be like, dude, I thought you were like so much taller. And I'm 5'8", like Joel and I are kind of like, not super tall guys. And I remember I posted a picture of me standing next to Alex Zek at Confluence, and he's like a giant too. And so, like, I look tiny compared to him. So people were messaging me on Instagram like, dude, like, for some reason, I thought you were like taller. This is wild.
Well, you're not so short that I'm suspicious of you.
Gotcha.
You're across the threshold. But under 5'5", I'm like, are you plotting secretly to kill me like David and Goliath style?
Gotcha.
Take you out of the knees.
Yeah, bro. You better watch out.
I'm not a Nephilim. I've got the normal amount of teeth and fingers and toes. That's so funny.
Good to know. But yeah, we're doing well, man. Listen, there's so many blessings in our life, and with the world the way it is what it is. And we're creating and building and doing what we're doing. And we've settled in, and we're in Topanga Canyon. We're in Topanga, California. We love where we're at. And it's also been a pretty wild year. My father passed away about 2 months ago. So that's a rite of passage, I think, for any person, especially a man, and just navigating that. But it's good to be back on to hang with you and your peeps.
Yeah, man. Condolences about the your dad. Sounded like he was a total legend, and he had a good run.
You did, man. I mean, June 9th, he would have been 94. So, you know, he lived a great life. He came from nothing and built a life and had a second grade education. Not that like conventional schooling education really means anything, but you know what I mean? So yeah, he was a good man, and I'm grateful that he was my dad.
Yeah, and he gave you an awesome name, Yerasimos.
That's true.
You know, I studied Greek for a while last year. I need to get back into it, but I could understand some basic conversations for a bit at that point, you know.
Cool.
What is it? Katalavino Ligo Elenica.
Yeah, you know a little Greek. That's perfect.
The first thing Yerasimos ever taught me was Sagapopoli Moromo, which is I love you, my baby.
That's the most important thing, of course.
He was like, that's the only Greek you need to know. I was like, okay.
I got a little window though into your life over all the sessions I've done with Sophie, and those have just been super fun.
That's amazing.
Is it where when she tells you all the horrific things that I put her through?
Yeah, you've traumatized her dramatically.
Yeah. I tie her up and throw her in the closet until she changes her behavior. You know, it's my number one tactic.
No, honestly, a lot of I do work with, you know, men and women frequently, and it has been kind of a thing lately for wives that I've worked with to help them sort of tweak their perception of their husbands. So things that were maybe irritating don't have to be so irritating. So all the synergy can be back. But that was never the case with Sophie. She's always working on deeper stuff.
Awesome.
Or she just didn't want to, you know, rat you out. I don't know which.
No, we're just perfect. We've just worked through, you know, every single thing and have a sunshine and rainbows and unicorns at all times relationship at this point.
Well, you guys do have a different kind of insight into your relationship with this human design stuff and all of the other modalities that both of you have been trained in and practicing for a long time. I find that really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's been a huge impact on our relationship, just knowing it, knowing the dynamics, knowing how to even just language to each other around certain things and each other's different auras, each other's, you know, waves, what maybe, you know, I'm better at, what he's maybe better at, all of that versus like, you have to be like me and we have to be exactly the same, and what's wrong with you that, you know, your energy is different or you speak differently. Or I mean, one of the like really, really basic things was in the beginning, there's a part in your design that can show, you know, if you're better at routines, like something so basic. And, you know, there's this sort of like blanket statement that everybody who, you know, is spiritual or on a path, like they have to have this morning routine that they're doing. And I'm really good at it. I love routine. I thrive off of routine. It's really good for me. I have always really, really loved it and really just had a lot of benefit from having a morning routine. And Yerasimos, if I can say, like, had always kind of struggled with it. And I would occasionally be in judgment where I was like, what is the problem? Like, you just get up and you do the same thing. Like, I don't understand how this is an issue. And then we were looking at our designs and it was like, oh, like he's literally designed not to have a morning routine.
Yeah, so like or at least consistent, like being super consistent in that regards. And so like more following just like a more general flow and
where do you see that in a human design?
It's one of the arrows. It's the top two arrows, I believe. Yeah.
But it's just basic level of human, like in relationship of like me just realizing that and being like, oh, I'm trying to get him to be different than how he's designed to be. Like, why am I hitting my head against a brick wall trying to change this person because I think that they should be like me versus just accepting that he's doing what's right for him?
Well, I think this is I agree with you. And I think this is just a general concept, even just around like individualism and freedom and like honoring who you are and also honoring the other person for who they are as well, you know, and then hopefully that's reciprocated. of course, we want to call our partners forward and we want them to be the best versions of themselves. But I think what happens very often in partnership is that, people tend to want to control the other person or turn them into versions of themselves based on like how they approach each day or the things they value. And I think an important part of partnership is like really focusing on yourself and what you value and how you want to go about things, and honoring that your partner's going to have their way of doing it also. So, human design is a tool for that. And even just the somatic piece. I mean, we're generally speaking, we could make the argument or say that most human beings have like emotional intelligence is pretty low as a species. It's not something that's, when we look around us and we look around the things going on in the world, when we take a look at social media, we're not seeing a lot of conscious communication. We're seeing a lot of reactivity. And so, building capacity within your nervous system and being able to hold space for discomfort and not just acting out from conditioned responses, goes a long way in partnership and communication. So, it's been beneficial for us to have access to these tools and to go through this process and to learn. But again, it starts with the individual. Like, you got to do your own work as an individual, and hopefully you're coming together with another person that has done their work, and then you can kind of, fit together in a certain way and create a life and move forward. But very blessed with the things we've learned and how we apply them in our lives and in our relationship.
Yep, that's really what it takes, is just each person managing their own vibe rather than trying to focusing on managing somebody else's vibe. But you can't actually do that. So especially if both people are doing that, then neither person's vibe is really managed. I wanted to let the chat know we're here for you guys today. If you have questions about human design or just about like somatic psychology or different areas of the philosophy that Yerasimos and Sophie are, teaching in their worlds. And while we maybe wait for one of those questions, I wanted to catch up with you, since we got you here, dude, about Here for the Truth. What's new over there? I see you guys just constantly facelifting your whole brand aesthetic on the website. It's just looking better every time I check in. It's awesome.
Yeah, man. I mean, we're, imperfect action. When Joel and I first met a little over 3 years ago, we just began. We started a process, and it didn't have to be perfect. And we were just like, let's just jump on Zoom and have a conversation. And then it was like, maybe we should have guests on. And then that process continued. And, the collaboration between the two of us, I think we have complementary skills, and, we're loving what we're putting out there, and we're having the conversations that we want to have. And they're solution focused. I think they're empowering. We don't really get too sucked into the doom and gloom of the craziness that's happening in the world. And I think that's a trap that I think many people in the so-called truth/freedom/conspiracy movement get into, is that, it's pretty dark, and it's just focusing on all the problems, and the gaze is focused externally. Whereas, my focus, and I think Sophie can agree with, and Joel and I are on the same page, is like, listen, in this time, the times we're in now, like, we need to focus on the things that we can control and really tune inwards. Like, we're trying to fix or comment on all the problems or issues of the world when we don't even have our home in order, when we don't know ourselves, when we're not on purpose, when our relationships aren't healthy. And so, I think we're just engaging, at least on the podcast, with that as like, I want to say the umbrella, but that's an underlying theme with what we're putting out there, is self-knowledge, self-understanding, self-acceptance, and really ultimately stepping into the person that you were born to be. And human design is a tool that supports individuals for that. And of course, we get into some esoteric stuff too, and we have different types of conversations that challenge the status quo in different industries. But it's just my opinion that human beings need to really stop wasting their time on things that don't matter and don't really impact their day-to-day life, and get their house in order.
Sophie, what's something that they've done recently that you found really profound or enjoyed a lot? Put you on the spot.
Oh.
Thanks.
I got an answer for that too when she goes.
I actually do listen to every single podcast that they put out. So I am legitimately a fan.
She doesn't just do it because she's married to me.
I don't. I really don't. I would say they put out an episode that was just the two of them. Like a month ago, and it was sort of about them both dealing with different kinds of loss. So Joel and his wife Alyssa lost a baby couple months into the pregnancy, and then Yerasimos lost his dad. And so it was this conversation of the difference between losing, a being at the very, very earliest stages possible of life, and then losing a father who was almost 94. So like older, like, had lived a full life, and sort of this thing of how do we deal with death? How do we look at it? How do we interact with it within our own beings of, I think a lot of the things in sort of modern day culture is a lot of like, oh no, we just don't even talk about it. We don't acknowledge it. It's not a thing. But it is. It's part of life. It's the opposite sort of side of the same coin. And so how do we embrace that? How do we really honor that? How do we grieve as humans? And yeah, I really, really appreciated just the honesty that both of them held in that conversation just between the two of them. I also really, really enjoyed, they just had Max Lowen on, who Yerasimos and I met at Anarchapulco. I still can't say that correctly. And I practiced it for like a week before we went. But we went and we met her there, and then they had her on the podcast, and she's an SRA survivor, and she's just someone that I also got a little bit, close with while we were down in Acapulco. And just her story and the vision of like the work that she's done on herself. And so it just seemed very, very inspirational to me in terms of how deeply someone can be traumatized or be hurt or go through these crazy experiences, and then the perseverance of the soul of a person's being to still show up, to still engage in life, to re-engage with a new way of being in the world and relating to their life outside of that. And yeah, both of those episodes most recently. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots that I've loved and have been so impactful, but those two really stand out to me just off the cuff with that question.
Well, thank you for actually saying that, because I wanted to comment on that too. That episode's really meaningful to me for obvious reasons. We had it right after my dad passed away, and I think the crux of it is like, how can you really gain greater meaning from your life by contemplating death? And something that I brought up in that episode is the concept of memento mori. Just the idea that like, can you meditate and well, first of all, what it means is remember you will die. And so it's like, again, we can have a conversation whether or not your spirit lives on forever and you have multiple lives, but like right now we're in this body and it's going to end at some point. It's not going, this particular life, this incarnation is not going to continue. And so, by sitting with that, by knowing that, and by feeling into that and contemplating it, like, how do you then choose to live? And like, what conversations are left unsaid? What things do you really want to do and create in your life? So, yeah, I'm really happy about that episode, and I felt like I honored my dad and like kind of shared a little bit about him and his story, and which was really cool. And actually, Michael Tazarian saw the episode, and he hit me up to come on Slave just a couple weeks ago or last week to talk about that exact topic, because he had written an article on it. So that was actually special for me to just be able to explore that subject with them as well. But yeah, man, I mean, the podcast is going well. Yeah, King of Clubs poster, that was a gift from my wife.
Clubs are literally fire, so
yeah.
Comment.
And the other thing I want to say is we started up something called the Round Table. We've done a few episodes on that where we bring two people on to have a conversation about sometimes where they maybe share some values but maybe disagree on certain subjects. They don't have to, but the first two we happened to be with David Whitehead and Gavin Nascimento, both that go by the moniker Truth Warrior. And, they're two people I have deep respect for, and they're principled human beings and know how to have a conversation and know how to debate and know how to honor each other and know how to express themselves in a way where very often we see online when there's a debate, there's just a screaming match. And so, I think foundationally they agree in similar principles, but we went into some topics where they had different views. And I just thought it was I'm really happy with how that turned out. And we're going to have another roundtable episode. I don't know if it's going to be about a debate, but we're having Max Lowen on with Irene Lyon, who's a nervous system expert, to explore again, like the nervous system and healing. And through Max's story as SRA survivor, I'm curious to see how that conversation is going to go. And Max is also a somatic practitioner, and supports people that have gone through similar processes. So anyways, long drawn out way to say the podcast is going well. Yeah, it's exciting. You know how it is, man. You got a podcast, you've had one for even longer, so it's fun.
Yeah, I sort of just
I'm gonna go give our dog to our groomer really quick, and then I'll be back.
Okay, sounds good. I'll just take you out for a sec. You've got to do dog mom duties. The funny thing is, I just looked up that Gavin guy, the other Truth Warrior. I'd never heard of him, and he kind of looks like David Whitehead, at least funny. In still photos. Like I can see a weird resemblance. There's a strange fractality and resonance.
Gavin's a legend, man. He's one of the OGs in a lot of ways, and his level of research on a lot of subjects. I really dig that guy, man. Just good.
Were you guys at Confluence?
Yeah, we were, man. So if you actually led 2 workshops there. We led an introduction to human design workshop there, which really happy. It was a packed house for that one. And then then one morning we led a nervous system workshop. So that was cool. And it was an amazing event. And we met at Music and Sky. I think it was like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. And something I talk about often is, our online communities are incredible and they're needed and they're required. And there's something to say about like meeting you in person and giving you a hug, like when I met you in person, I was like, oh man, like Chance, man, we connected years ago, and to see you and to be in the same space and to connect with other homies and to relate and to be in each other's field and energy. It's just fucking awesome, man. I love it.
Yeah, dude. I was wondering if you met while you were there at Confluence, Mark Gober.
Oh yeah, Mark, man. I do know Mark Gober. He's become a friend of mine, and we've had him on the podcast twice. Nice. And he was there, and I love Mark, man. Like I just love his story and like the fact he's written 6 books in the last 8 years on like all different subjects.
Yeah, that guy's amazing. Eileen met him at Confluence, Eileen McCusick, and she hit me up and told me that Mark and I needed to connect. And so I just recorded an interview with him, and it's like a whirlwind tour. We covered 2 of his books in one 2-hour show. And it's going to be great. Watch out for that Monday. But
yeah,
check it out. We covered the first book and the newest book. So the end of Upside Down Thinking and the end of Upside Down Medicine. It was like a 2-punch knockout of the, all the failures of the mainstream paradigm and all the solutions we could throw in there too. It was awesome. So that guy's cool.
He's really cool, man. And he did a great talk. He opened up Confluence with his talk, focusing, I think, on it was his first book, The End of Upside Down Thinking. And in our first episode with him, we covered a bunch of different things because, we always like to go through a person's personal hero's journey and major rites of passage, for first-time guests. And then we just got into, different stuff around his books. But our most recent one was on a subject that I feel very close to, and something that kind of initiated my even foray into research and conspiracy is through the health angle and through challenging the allopathic system and questioning it. And so his book is really great. And Mark is like really incredible at taking in lots of information in a short period of time and synthesizing it. And then of course, coloring it through his own kind of views and ways.
And he's got the journalistic neutrality to it. Yeah. Where he presents you with all the information that you could go double check for yourself. And then he draws the conclusions that information will show, but he does it in a way that's like I really like the neutrality and the honesty behind it. Here's Marty Leeds with a nice super chat there, buddy.
Marty, what's up, man? I met Marty at Music and Sky
last one.
Year. Yeah.
Yeah, he's my neighbor now. ish.
Oh, no way.
So go check out Marty on Biocharisma, Topher's podcast. He was just on there. It's great.
Oh, I met Topher at Acapulco. He's cool too. He's in your hood, right? He's
yeah. He's also a neighbor.
You guys got a good crew there.
So you're right about Mark Gober, though. He just inhales information and synthesizes it. And I was like, what's the next upside down thing that you're gonna put right?
I said the same thing.
My guess is it's either gonna be like the cosmology, astrophysics question, or that or history. I'm betting the first one, but I would love to see him do it into upside down history. That's an area that I've been really digging on lately. Like, we have this other show with Dylan Sakosio, me and him, that's just for our members. And we're about to put out the 4th episode, where I spend about an hour and a half just covering all of the examples of the authors of antiquity that have been completely, that were completely faked or forged. That like, some dude in the Renaissance era just pulled it out of a hat and said, oh, I found the lost works of Tacitus, and this is, Roman history. And like all of our belief of the history of ancient Rome and the Greeks before that is more or less derived from a similar, very dubious chain of custody. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, but it's something we got going on coming up soon.
Well, this
Tomorrow,
this is the thing that's so amazing, man, when you think about all the mysteries out there, all the knowledge, all the things that are available to us to explore. And then as individuals, we get to decide like, hey, I'm into this or I'm not into that, and I want to go down that rabbit hole or not this rabbit hole. And I think a lot of people can get lost in things that don't really support their day-to-day life in some ways, but in other instances, it's incredible, and I commend that.
So, Sophie, there is a question about human design that I know we've talked about it in a recent episode, but it's one of those things that I'm sure a lot of us at first kind of struggle to feel like we can wrap our arms around. And Liam in the chat, he says, where would I actually start to try and understand human design? So I'm guessing, you might be able to recommend books or websites or things that you've done in the past aside from our conversation. Maybe even just reintroducing some of the concepts of the topic. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things, if you're looking for more of like a website situation, is jovianarchive.com, JOVIAN archive.com, mainly because that website just has a lot of source material meaning the coming straight from Ra, who is the person who downloaded and brought this system into being here, because there's a lot of interpretation that happens. There's a lot of melding it with other things, which is great and wonderful. And I do think that those can be really helpful. And I'm a proponent of sort of knowing the foundational things first, or knowing the starts of things and then going from there.
I think a lot of people get hung up on the they read it from the interpretations rather than from the principles. And that's kind of been my experience with interfacing on human design too. So that's helpful.
And books wise, there's the definitive book of human design. And that is also by Ra, as well as
Linda Bunnell. Linda Bunnell.
And that one can be really, really good. It's like a black and red cover. And for me, it's like coming from the lineage, like the direct lineage first, and then branching out into if there's other things that, excite you, or if other people are kind of speaking in a different language that lands better for you. But I just sort of like staying with the initial sort of energy of a system first before sort of dissipating. And that also partly comes from my own learning of it, where I started learning from 2 teachers and then found out that a lot of it was sort of interpreted or skewed in certain ways, and then sort of like had to backtrack a lot in my own learning of like, oh wait, maybe that's not actually the sort of like the foundations of how things are explained in human design. And that was what really muddied my own experience of it. So at first, sort of having my chart described to me through their lenses, it just kind of like some of it didn't land in certain ways or didn't resonate. And what I found was it was because it wasn't accurate. Because it wasn't the original sort of teachings of it or the original descriptions and things like that. And when I went back into that more and kind of pared away all of the sort of like other fluff that had been added, that really, really helped me get clearer on it. Yerasimos, do you have a...
Well, yeah, there's also, these 2 books that were sent to me privately via PDF. They're 2 of the OG books that Ra put together in like the early 90s, the white book and the black book. It's difficult to find them. But, for whoever is listening now, your audience, just hit me up on Telegram at Yerasimos.
I didn't mention those because I don't know how we're supposed to.
I don't know. The fuck, I gave them to me. I want to pass the knowledge forward. If someone wants to read them, they're like PDFs. I mean, some of the copies you can read most of it, but it's not like the most perfect printing. But yeah, I'll send them along if you're interested. And it's just really like print out your chart at jovianarchive.com and start investigating your own chart. I think that's one way to go about it, or get a reading with someone. Sophie does readings. I do readings. So that's one good way as well. But I'm always an advocate of self-education. So yeah, I mean, the book she's talking about, the bigger one, the foundational book, is called Human Design: The Science of Differentiation. You can find it on Amazon, I think. I don't know, it's like $50 or something. It's a big, thick book.
I'm gonna grab my I Ching cards and use those as a reference as I try to bridge the I Ching understanding that what little I've gathered over my life to like what my chart has going on. But Braden, in the meantime, Braden wants to know from both of you guys what has been the difference that understanding human design has brought into your life. I'm sure probably more than one.
Yeah. Sophie, you can start.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things for me is that I'm what's known as a projector type. So there's 5 main types. So there's generators, manifesting generators, manifestors, projectors, and reflectors. And these are sort of the 5 big sort of archetypal energy aura types in human design. And we live on a planet where there's about 70% of people are known as generator types. So they're either generators or manifesting generators. And as I said, I'm a projector. So I'm not a generator type. So that was sort of like the biggest learning for me, was that like, that's one of the main conditioning influences that I continue to be aware of, but also had to sort of decondition from, in terms of being on, this realm, whatever it is, of 70% of this energy, that you're supposed to be a generator. And that's how we're supposed to be in the world, which what makes people a generator is they have this square sort of sacral center defined in their chart. And so it's this sort of energizer bunny energy that's going. It's this really creative energy. And it's amazing. It's awesome. And I don't have access to that consistently. So when we're around people who have something that we don't have, we're more influenced by it because we're open there. We're taking in that energy from the spaces around us. So being a projector, sort of getting in tune with like, what's my natural energy level? I don't have to keep up with the generators in my life. And one of the biggest sort of things is just to know, like, where am I worried or like, where's my edge of like, am I going to be labeled lazy? So all of these things, all of these types, all of these personality traits, everything has sort of like a downside to them, or like a shadow side, or the not self theme. So the thing that you're probably going to be like the most worried about saying or claiming. So like for me, it was like, is it okay for me to take naps? That was a big thing. Is it okay if I, get overwhelmed by the energies around me and kind of need to, as I say to like Yerasimos, like there's certain days where it's like, I need to be horizontal. Like I love going to these big, festivals and truther community meetups and things like that. Like we were just at Confluence and we're going to Music in Sky, and we've gone to, this will be our like 5th or 6th Music in Sky.
Yeah.
They're amazing. They're wonderful. I love them so much. And afterwards, like for me, knowing like I'm a projector, I just got inundated with a ton of sacral energy, sort of like 24/7. I'm going to need to like horizontal empty out my own system, decondition from I have to like keep up with everyone else. That was just, I mean, if you're going to say like the one thing that really, really, shifted for me drastically was just that, like getting in tune with like, what's my natural energy level? Where am I pulling in too much sacral energy? Where am I sort of unconsciously doing that versus consciously being like, okay, I need a little like extra energy today. So I'm going to pull on the sacrals around me, but then I have to sort of rest. I sort of like that can't be my go-to at all times. That's where projectors get more into like the burnout, adrenal fatigue area. So that was a big thing. And also that for the projector, my way of being in the world is to wait for the invitation. So I'm not designed to initiate things a lot of the time. I'm designed to be asked questions or be invited into somebody. And then my aura is really penetrative. And so I can feel deeply into the other and then help guide their way of using energy. And so that was also a big thing of sort of deconditioning from like, oh, I'm supposed to be making shit happen. I'm supposed to be out there, go, like hustle. Like that's not my design. That's not actually how I will best flow in this place.
My buddy Kyle from Tippecanoe Herbs is a projector. So that, waiting to be invited thing happens. But I just invited him to do a Vibrant next month on a specific date. And he's like, I checked my calendar and I had written down, and I'm not gonna give away what it's about, but he had written down a topic and presentation and put it on his calendar for that day without knowing that meant it was going to be that presentation was for Vibrant that day.
Awesome. That's super awesome.
So he was like, I knew something's happening, but I was just waiting to be invited. And it's really funny.
Yeah.
I've ordered some herbs from him.
Yeah.
Oh, he's the dude.
We have some like teas and stuff.
You had him on here for the truth?
No. I mean, I've connected. I'm assuming it's the same person. I've connected with him.
Yeah, Tippecanoe Herbs.
Yeah, and I think we have a mutual friend. Is it Wisconsin area or something like that? Or
yeah, he's brilliant.
Cool.
I've done tons of shows with him. He's a regular, you could say.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'll answer. Was it Braden's question?
Yeah, Braden. He also was curious about which type has the Jedi powers.
Yeah, well, they all can have the Jedi powers when you live according to your design. I think, and how those Jedi powers are manifested will be unique for each person. But this is what I love about human design. Okay, first of all, I want to say it's a system. It's information. It's a tool. Like, as with any tool, like, don't fucking get dogmatic over it and get sucked into it and be like, this is the truth. This is the Bible. I must fucking live my life according to this. And like I like it because it allows you to get out of the compare and contrast game and stake your flag in the ground even more about, this is who I am. These are my gifts. These are potentially, my challenges. Because we look around and all you have to do is watch social media and everyone's like, oh, but this person's doing this and I need to do this. And it's like, fucking tune out the noise and understand that you are a freaking miracle. You are a one of one. There is no one that's ever been you. That's no one that's going to be you. And like right now, there's no one that's you. And so what knowledge, what stuff out there allows you to own yourself even more and choose yourself even more and love yourself and accept yourself and go, man, what a miracle I was born. All the processes that took place for me to fucking be birthed into this world. Like, that's freaking cool. And I have a purpose and I have a mission. And when you look around and you go, every single thing I can look around now on my desk, in my room, anywhere has a purpose. And so to think that we don't, as an individual being, we do. And so human design, I think, can help highlight that. It helps highlight. And what's different from human design compared to maybe some other esoteric systems like astrology or numerology or the source cards or all these other systems that can highlight, certain unique traits within you, which I love, all of them. Strategy and authority is very unique to human design. And Sophie mentioned that in terms of being a projector, which is to wait for the invitation. So each type has its own strategy. And then there's like several authorities in human design, and authority is your unique decision-making process. So for me, when I first found out that I'm an emotional authority and 51% of the population are emotional authorities, which means in your chart, the bottom right triangle is colored in, which means that you're always existing on an emotional wave. Now, what that wave looks like and how it manifests depends on your unique chart in the channels that are activated. And so what that means ultimately is you don't really have truth in the now. That you learn and you gain emotional clarity over time. And so don't make decisions when you're at the height of a wave or the low of the wave. And so give yourself time for major decisions to get data points along the way when you're like moving through that wave. And then hopefully you get to a place of emotional clarity where you can go, this is what it feels right for me. And so when I realized that, I was like, yo, like just because I feel down at a certain time in my life or super excited, I don't need to rush into anything, or I don't need to say yes to something or no to something. Now, yes, as a generator, I'm a pure generator. Chance, I believe you're an MG. And so we have that sacral response, that or that like I'm lit up by this, I'm drawn to this, or like, nah, fuck this shit. I don't want it, you know? But because we have the emotional center colored in, that trumps from an authority standpoint. And so I'm like, let me just take some time. So learning to be patient and taking time changed my life.
Yeah, I needed to hear this because I, particularly around sometimes purchasing stuff where I'm like, oh, it would be so fun if I had this right now. And I kind of want it right now. And I'm like, by the time I get it, the day might have run out and I might not even be able to enjoy it. And then the next day I don't really get to it. And then the day after that, I'm like, why did I buy that? I don't really care. I actually don't want this.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And something that I always tell my clients when I work with them, like as an example, like imagine you're with your friend and you're like hanging out and then you're fired up to see your friend that you haven't seen in a while. And your friend's like, yo, let's drive across the country. And you're like, yeah, let's do it. And then you start driving and then you're like 3 states over and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I have shit I need to do back home. I got responsibilities. Like you made a decision on the wave, but you didn't give yourself time to get to a place of emotional clarity. And you see that too, even just look around. I made I said the example earlier about looking on social media. Look at people communicating. They're literally communicating from their emotional waves, or for the other 49% of people that don't have the emotional center defined, they're taking in the conditioning of those emotional waves and amplifying them. That's the downside of the open centers, is that you can receive conditioning and they can impact you in a way where you don't have awareness. And so we just see 51% of the population in the world living out and making decisions. Well, I wouldn't say all 51%, but the majority of them in our world that are making decisions from the height of the wave. And then the rest of the people are taking in this conditioning and amplifying it. And you just see fireworks, coming over, and unconscious communication and people talking shit and unfollowing people and canceling people and ending fucking relationships, because they didn't just wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And then by the time, like after it's all kind of blown over, now there's things that have been said and things that have been done that can't be taken back, even though, maybe they don't even feel that strongly anymore.
Yeah. Dude, I literally have had people come into my DMs and go off on me, friends of 20 something years, because of my views. And in my mind, I'm just like, like maybe you should have just waited.
Well, it's everything. Yeah. That gets the conspiracy label. Not everything, I guess, but a lot of it, wait, it's usually just 5 years ahead of the curve of what becomes accepted and known.
Of course,
That's why the whole cooties thing was really so great overall, because there's so much about it that we can now just say to anybody, our boomer parents or whatever, and they're like, yeah, that sounds right. Or yeah, I heard that. Or they're telling me stuff.
I know.
Like my mom, she's totally off the moon. She's totally convinced that was a scam, the moon landing. And I was like, nice, Mom, nice. You looked then into that for yourself and you made that decision. She's like, yeah, I looked at the footage and it just looks completely ridiculous at this point with 2024 eyes. It's like worse than 90s CG. It's on a whole nother level of Well, anyway, that's a side tangent. I want to bring up my chart here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Because I have some questions, and then there's still some questions from the chat I want to talk about as well. But I'm curious, first of all, using this as an example for everyone to reference, tell me about the difference between, okay, so what I'm understanding is the left column that has design as the header and the red numbers, and the right column has personality and the black numbers, that this all has to do with my zodiac chart or my astrological birth chart, right?
Well, yes and no. So the numbers that are there, the number before the period, that's going to correlate with the I Ching.
Right. And then the glyph is a planetary glyph.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so each of those are different personality traits. And then the number after the period is what's known as a line. And that's basically like coloring the personality trait for you personally.
Okay. So that definitely opens up some questions. So first of all, we talked about this in the InnerVerse episode, but on the personality side with the sun glyph is 25.
Mm-hmm.
That's innocence. That's the I Ching correspondence to this sun in Aries as an idea. Makes sense to me. But what's the difference between, so I get that that's like a personality trait, but what's the difference over here on the design side for the sun? Where's that number derived from? I know that 58 in the I Ching is like joyful abundance or something like that, which is legit. But so like what's the difference between design and personality?
So design is going to be more of your body. So it's going to be more unconscious, more shadowy aspects, most likely. And that comes online about 88 days before you're born. And all of these have to do with the neutrino streams. So neutrinos are being the smallest particle that holds information or that holds mass. And these are particles that are flying through the world at all times and the whole universe and blah, 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 and they're picking up and dropping off information. And so the design part is your body. So it's getting designed, it's getting this imprint 88 days before you're born. And so those personality traits correlate more with like how maybe others might describe you, or they may be more sort of like unconscious responses, or it might be more how your body feels. So like one of the things to look at in your chart, you have a couple channels that
Can I ask one other thing real quick about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if the design side is more body, shadow, unconscious in a sense, not necessarily unconscious, but maybe it's more like subconscious. Sure. Mm-hmm. So with the sun in astrology represents what we are aware of, or what we tend to focus on or have a lot of attention towards. And I find it interesting that mine's got this hexagram 58 there, which is joyous or abundance, because my baseline experience of life is super happy all the time and always noticing how abundant everything is and how available everything is. Like I'm literally just in the joyful abundance vibe 24/7. You can ask Jen. That's a fact. So is that basically what it's saying, is kind of like a default awareness in a way? Because that's where the sun's at. It's not so unconscious.
Yes, as long as you haven't been conditioned out of it.
And also, you're someone who's done a certain amount of work on yourself. So as you go through life and as you do certain personal development work, like these things aren't just like, oh, I didn't know that about me, I'm not aware of it. It's more, it's something that can become more conscious. It's just, it's different than the personality side that may be initially more conscious and something you may be more aware of.
And okay, cool. I was just going to say, because you have like a couple channels that are fully design side in terms of like your 3740 and even your 952, like those may be more how your body feels when you tune into your somatic experience of life versus like your sort of like mind thinking about things. So for the 3740, that's the channel of community. It's very tribal. So it might be more like your physical body is drawn to that just more strongly within your sense of self than maybe like logically within your mind, if that makes sense. So then, yeah, the personality is going to be more of that sort of initially conscious side. That's what gets imprinted as soon as you're born. And so that's part of why the time of your birth is so important, because that correlates with that being sort of imprinted within your personality side.
Yeah. I want to read something. I have some notes on your incarnation cross. And for those people that are listening, your incarnation cross, some people call it the life theme. You can say it's your purpose in life, but it's not a purpose that's just inherently yours where you're entitled to it. It's something that unfolds and evolves over time, especially as you're living more your authentic path and you're honoring your strategy and authority. It's something that becomes more apparent. And what I love about this, and I remember this when we've connected in the past, and you're the left angle cross of healing. You actually share the same incarnation cross as Wilhelm Reich, which is interesting. And so just some notes that I have here. Your purpose in life is to bring healing to the world. This may come about indirectly, such as possibly becoming sick yourself and inspiring others through your own healing journey. Whether you are conscious of this effect, you bring a healing energy to others everywhere you go through your deep love and compassion. Sometimes simply walking through a room can trigger healing in those people around you. In this regard, you must take responsibility for your own well-being. Otherwise, you will become overloaded by other people's disease, becoming depleted and even unwell yourself. You might think it is your responsibility to heal the whole world, but if you attempt this, you will become exhausted and unable to assist anyone. Remember that sometimes the simplest healing takes place through everyone, especially you, lightening up and having a good laugh. Anyways, there's more to it, but I just feel like it just from what I know about you, I've always thought of you as someone with such a healing presence and what you want to bring into the world and what you've been interested in. So it's pretty cool.
Especially interesting to share the same incarnation cross as Reich, because what I do as a professional healing capacity, it has a lot to do with Reich. Orgone energy and biofield energy are not too different, honestly. They've got a lot of overlap. I look at all these things as kind of languages for comprehending the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that's in the chart for sure. I can relate to the part about having to figure out how to not take on other people's stuff. I think lots of empathic people get that. It kind of boils down to, being super vigilant about any level of they're doing it to me, victimhood, and
Mm-hmm.
never holding that posture, especially the sneaky kinds of like, I'm the good guy just trying to help, and they're the bad guy that I'm there for them though. This like in relationships and all that. So I got a really cool email just earlier, I think yesterday, I guess, where someone who I'd worked with, since they were a kid, they'd had this particular type of what the doctors called autoimmune, but I don't really believe in that type of interpretation per se. But I'm just going to read this email. He says, thanks again for seeing me on Friday. You should know that my skin, as well as my outlook, have improved since then. For the insights you helped me to uncover, I will always be grateful. So he'd had, sacral level and solar plexus level issues that were manifesting in very interesting patterns that were hard for him to notice until I pointed out, you realize it's the same thing happening over and over again. And a lot of that getting projected into, the feminine energy in his life unconsciously. Mm-hmm. And, reeling all that in, it's cool how just within, I don't know, Friday is 5 days ago or whatever, that his skin that has had lifelong, externally visible issues has begun clearing up or changing that dramatically. And that was one session. So it's pretty amazing what's possible whenever we fine tune our psyche and realize how the belief patterns that we're playing out in our life are actually not separate from what our body is struggling with, that they're the same thing.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's the foundation, and not more of a non-materialist view of health in terms of what's our state of consciousness and our mindset. But it's amazing, man. And the other thing about the left angle cross of healing is that part of what you're here to do is to, bring healing to situations that, maybe more contemporary or traditional models are aren't unable to help. And so even with what you do with biofield tuning, I would say it's a little bit more esoteric than being like, here, just take this supplement and you'll be fine.
Well, even I'm being curious, Chance, I don't know, but like when we were at a confluence, Eileen was there, and she was talking about this thing she started doing of like tuning people's astrological charts.
That's so far. That's over my head so far.
Okay. So I was curious about it because we talked about it a little bit of like, how cool would it be to like tune someone's human design chart? I mean, what would be the difference of it or whatever? And so I was like, oh, Chance, let's talk about that.
I think you can tune any aspect of somebody's psyche. And I think that you can look for any aspect of their psyche in the framework that you're looking for it.
Yeah.
I don't know that Eileen would necessarily agree with me about it, but I consider even the biofield anatomy could potentially be imaginary. Not that that makes it not real, but that it's a language, just like the word or any other word, pick a letter. That's all imaginary. It's not real per se.
Yeah.
But we can still transmit meaning through that imaginary framework. And I think that might be what the biofield anatomy is. It's a language that once we have it, we can talk to the innate intelligence of our body through that language. And I think that that's kind of the nature of all divinatory systems in a way, including self-knowledge systems like astrology or human design. I think that might even be why some people are into one style of astrology and others are in another style. And the one that you think is the right one tends to resonate with you.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think it's all meaning making. I mean, it's all like, how do we create meaning out of certain things? So even, in somatics, it's all about how our body doesn't speak, in words, because my left elbow doesn't know how to say like, hey, P.S., this is what's happening. So our somatic speaks in symbols and symptoms. Our psyche speaks in symptoms and symbols. So I think it's the same thing with like human design. It's just, even when you look at a human design chart, it's like it's symbols and things that are, showing up, and then we interpret it. We give meaning to these things. And then, as Yerasimos says, if it resonates, if it makes sense, then great. And even like Ra talks about how it's an experiment. So play with it, try it, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, throw it out. Like, I don't care, do what works for you. But like, if it can give any kind of help or assistance in terms of how we navigate this physical realm, body, being here, why not? Like, why not use what's available to us to have the best experience that we can? Even like my experience of having biofield tunings with you, it's like it has helped me in my physical experience.
I still need to book.
I'm making the meaning out of it, or whatever. Or even when you like, bring something up, it's like it's meaning making. But
the symptoms are symbols. That's the key. And that's actually one thing that I find really profound about symbolic literacy. I'm sure you've heard Michael Tsarion say symbolic literacy is psychic self-defense. I say that all the time myself. But there's another level to it where it's kind of like able to be taken on the offense. But I don't mean that in a combative way, more like a harnessing the potential that you weren't previously taking the initiative to harness through what, as Jung calls it, synchronicity, right? Most people, even woo people, their conception of synchronicity is that it's kind of, maybe not everyone is on this level. Some people would think it's the norm, but for most that understand the term, it's the exception rather than the rule to the events of life, right? But once we get really well versed in symbolic literacy and have that imaginal capacity to do a 360 view around something and keep circling it until we see what matches with our inner world, then all of a sudden synchronicity is no longer like this rare event or occasional event. the more symbolic literacy we have, we can actually see that every dang thing is synchronicity in every moment. And there's some aspect of that that's a choice, like you brought it up. The fact that you even exist and all the people that had to live before you to bring you here. So that's kind of evidence of it as well. But I love this subject. I want to kick over to some of the chat questions for you guys, though. The first one.
Trying to keep up with the chat.
Yeah, they're crushing.
How do you see the chat? I can't see the chat.
So I think Yerasimos, you're in private chat. If you go up on the cursor, you need to go to comments.
Oh, comments.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa, damn. There's all these comments coming in here. What up, everyone? Now I want to read through them.
You want to know what's great is we got about 90 people in the chat concurrently right now. Awesome. And not a single thing needs to be moderated. Nobody's got a weird or iffy or bad vibe. Nobody needs to be banned. This is the coolest on the internet. It's the most quality.
That's such a testament to you then, you're creating that space, you're creating that, container.
The key is you ban generously when necessary. Don't be afraid to do it. Just as soon as it's weird, ban it. But once you're ready to do that, you don't have to hardly ever ban. You set the tone for, it's a boundaries thing. But yeah, Shelly said, this isn't a question, but I like this comment. After the last episode with Sophie looking at my human design made so much sense. I love that she is back. Thank you. Thanks
so much for being here, and I'm grateful that you listened, and I'm grateful it made sense and resonated. It's awesome.
Liam sent a really kind €10 super chat. He's one of those 1%ers in the audience that does 90% of the support, so thank you, buddy.
Awesome.
And then this is a good question. Rand wants to know, can we get more information on how the age change in 2027 into Sleeping Phoenix will affect those with that particular incarnation cross? That's an interesting question. And maybe just recap what the heck that means as a concept too, before we answer the specifics.
Yeah. So one of the big pieces is that we're switching from the cross of planning, which is actually my incarnation cross, to this incarnation cross of the Sleeping Phoenix. And a big piece of this shift coming in 2027 that we're already in, it's already happening. So this isn't just as soon as it turns, 2027, all of a sudden this is the thing. It's no, we're in this already. We're in this transformation, this mutation. And it's happening mainly in that solar plexus emotional center that Yerasimos has chatted about a bit. And so it's really it's bringing in a massive amount, a change in emotional intelligence. So I think I said in the podcast too, of the solar plexus, that emotional center is the youngest center. It's the most immature center that we have so far. And it's going through this massive mutation. It's going through this huge change. And so it's going to be bringing in a whole new way of how we're going to be relating with each other, how the emotional center is going to be showing up. And to be fair, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of sort of theories around it. And at the same time, none of us know boots on the ground, how that's going to manifest or how that's going to feel or how that's going to be played out yet, because we're not fully in it going through it. So there's part of that, of just this unknown. I will say that what I do believe and what I sort of will keep sort of banging on about is how do we get the most emotionally intelligent within ourselves, if we're emotionally defined, as well as if we're open emotionally. How can we navigate the emotional relationships within ourselves as well as with others? Be as self-aware as possible, be as self-assured, seated within yourself as possible, so that you can navigate the changes that are happening. How that's specifically going to affect you as somebody with that, I don't know. I can't answer that. Because again, I think it's going to be how we ride that. But a big piece is that we're switching from really tribal, which is that cross of planning, which is a tribal energy. It's a coming into, group with other people and basically being what do you need me to be? So it's a lot more of the self-sacrifice. It's a lot more of the do for others, let go of yourself, what was the rally cry of the whole craziness the past few years of like, it's completely blanking on me, but like,
you're killing grandma.
Yeah, basically that. But there was like this, it's not
my face diaper protects you and
basically.
Your face diaper protects me.
Exactly. But it's a lot of that. It's that self-sacrificing energy. And instead we're moving into this cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is much more of an individual energy. And so what that means is it's how are we going to show up with other people? We are social beings. We will always need other people and to be in relationship with others. And how do we show up in that as ourselves? So instead of coming to a group or coming into a tribe or, you know, coming into a family and being like, how do you need me to morph and change so that I can adapt and be what you need me to be, into, hey, this is who I am. This is what I bring. These are my strengths. These are what I, you know, can contribute. And then doing that, but staying as yourself in the collective. Does that make sense? So less of the melding and self-sacrifice, more of the righteous of the selfishness of knowing yourself and then showing up as yourself. Oh yeah, for the greater good. That was the one. Thank you. That I was looking for the greater good. So sort of getting rid of that mindset and getting more into what is for me, not as like screw everyone else, but as from a place of this is who I am, this is how I can contribute, and staying in that, in your own sort of skin, your own embodiment, more of that. Yerasimos, you got more on that?
No, you're cool right now. I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, that's great. Matt says he used the InnerVerse code at Kyle's shop today to pick new herbs. That's a 10% off, and you support the podcast with that. And I legitimately have no qualms about promoting that particular affiliate link. He's got amazing stuff. But I wanted to ask about that age change thing. Remind me how long that type of cycle is between
about 400 years.
400 years, yeah.
Around that.
Okay, so it's pretty significant.
Yeah. And it's going to be a lot of things like, I mean, this is just predictions and stuff, but also it's what we're seeing of a lot of like the structures and everything that's being built over the past 400 years to kind of keep everybody in this tribal state crumbling and sort of rebuilding into the new of how are we going to be. I mean, even just looking at like the financial infrastructure and things like that, these new things coming about that are shifting how we have to relate.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if Sophie mentioned this. Sorry, I was reading some of the comments. Is that the importance of nervous system regulation and emotional intelligence is going to be huge as we move into this next cycle. And so again, the more work people can do on that, like obviously the biofield tuning, the somatic experiencing and related stuff that Sophie does and that I do, and whatever you can do to build greater capacity for you to navigate life and to navigate the challenges of life, which even just that, it makes me think of the definition of self-esteem as having the competence to navigate the basic challenges of life or challenges in life. And so I think, again, emotional intelligence and greater nervous system capacity is going to be even more important as we move forward, especially in a relationship setting in our interpersonal dynamics. Because if we do get into communities where individuals are honored, how do we communicate within communities? It's not like we're social beings. There are going to be communities, but we're moving to a more individualistic age, not this collectivistic age where we need to sacrifice who we are for some collective or family or group. But it's more about honoring one another for individuality and what we bring to the table. I don't know if you mentioned any of that, but I just figured I'd share it.
I started with it, but it's good to have an exclamation point underline reiteration.
Yeah, and we all respond to different vibes differently. So like what seeds get planted by the voice of Sophie and in who is different than who might
very true.
The fertile soil for Yerasimos's voice. You know what I'm saying? But you brought up the nervous system component. I've told this story a couple of times, but it's just one that sticks out to me. I'm not going to claim that it's something that happens every time I do a session. The types of intuition that come through and the extremity of like how, whoa, like the sort of the psychic moment is vary from session to session. Sure. But you're talking about nervous system work. Is that also including the capacity for our nervous system to take on like basically kinetic energy and then store it long term that without a release? What I mean by that is I had a client where as soon as I started the session, the first fork I hit, I felt this overcharge in her nervous system that immediately told me, and then I was like, where is it at? And I found the age too, but it was like a car accident and like a head trauma where the kinetic impact had gone into her body but never come back out in another form. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Is that something that you're talking about when you're referring to the nervous system work or like discharging like overages in a way, or is there more to it?
So I'm curious. So I wouldn't call it kinetic energy, but I'm curious if it's just a language thing of, I would say, like survival stress or survival energy within the system gets locked in when we go through a certain traumas or even like blunt force. It's like this energy comes into our bodies, and then the nervous system capacity work is how do we dissipate that out? Because a lot of it sort of gets stuck. And so that's when it becomes that trauma state and it stays with us versus something that just happened and continued through us and integrated and was able to sort of dissipate more quickly. Then that's not going to be in the here and now trauma experience.
Right. Because energy changes forms, right? It can go from potential to kinetic to yada, yada, heat and all of the above. So when we take a big hit, sometimes it converts to like trauma energy or fight or flight energy in the nervous system, for lack of better description, and then doesn't ever get shifted into something. Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about. I hit the fork and I was like, oh, you got in a car wreck at 21, you hit your head. And then that was true. And the forks can tell you that kind of thing, and also help with dissipating them. I mean, that's one thing I recommend to people is especially weighted forks. But how do you help people dissipate, that nervous system overcharge?
Yeah. One, it really depends on the person. For me, when I'm working with them, and I'm sure you experience this as well, of like each person's nervous system is different. So you may have the same sort of like building blocks and sort of things like that, but then navigating it is very, very personal. And very individual in terms of like if somebody is depending on if they have more of a high sympathetic charge, or maybe they're more stuck in like a dorsal freeze state, it's going to be very different how I approach that. But either way, I'm going to be really looking at the person's experience and letting them lead, letting their body lead in terms of what they're ready for, like what they're ready to let go of, what they're ready to integrate, what they're ready to face. And then one of the biggest things is going really, really slowly, because if we go, especially in the work that I do, I don't know about the biofield tuning with this, but like in the work that I'm doing, it's like, if I go too fast, it can actually blow out the system, too much, or take them outside of capacity. And then that's re-traumatizing. So if somebody's going to be telling me about some traumatic experience that happened, it's going to be like, we're going to start pretty far away from the actual experience and then sort of like slowly work our way into like the impact or what happened. But part of it can be like staying far away and then taking breaks. So titrating it for the system so that it's not just like, you tell me the entire story, as fast as possible, because part of that is people are just kind of numbing out or not really feeling what's happening for them as they're speaking about it. So you really want to slow it down and then titrate it in and out. So when I feel that activation coming up within the system, I'm going to basically like distract for a minute so the system can kind of calm for a moment, and then we'll go back into it. They'll sort of rise, and then I'll take a break, change the topic of like, oh, I really love your sneakers, by the way. Where did you get, it can be really random, but it's something to kind of like give their nervous system just a rest, because the whole thing that happens with trauma is you're overwhelmed. It's too much for you to process. And so we want to be giving them these breaks so that it stays safe within their system, and their system doesn't go into like complete shutdown, or as I said, that overwhelm. There's also another piece where I'll tend to bring in, like, if it was like a life or death situation and they were actually scared that they weren't going to survive, it can be really helpful to be like, when was the moment when you realized that you were going to live? And feel into that. Like, so me, with all my work, it's very somatic based. And so when I'm talking about traumas or histories, I'm curious more about how it's still present for the person in their body in the here and now versus what it was like then. I want to know what it's like now, still holding in their system. As you said, like, you know, this energy was still in there. So it's still there. It's still present in the here and now body. So how does it feel now to sit with, I survived or I lived, and sort of feeling that? Because it can also be like, part of trauma is not knowing if you're going to survive and holding that tension. And so reorienting to, you did survive. When was the moment that you realized you were going to survive? How can we really like expand that, feel that? And so then when we're going through the timeline of maybe what happened, I'll take breaks of going to that. Okay, so this, you know, it's really, really ramping up. It's really ramping up. I can feel the nervous system kind of getting to that top of their window of tolerance. And then it's sort of like, okay, let's just take a moment to feel into, like, you survived. You're here. You're sitting here. You're breathing. What's that like? So that's another way to titrate it, so that you're not just like in somatic experiencing languaging, it's around like the trauma vortex and the counter vortex. So we're not just staying in the trauma vortex and just like, you know, swirling around in there. It's like we want to take these breaks into the counter vortex so that the system can kind of reorient and can kind of like dissipate that energy and then go back in and then come back out. And as you're saying, like, allowing that energy to move through, sometimes that'll be like shaking or some sort of impulse maybe that the body wanted to do. So there's also that of like, we'll be able to act out or express different impulses that maybe the body wanted to do but couldn't do at the time. So that's another way to sort of get the energy to move through in the here and now present moment, because that creates more freedom. It creates more space within the system. Does that make sense? It's sort of funny when I'm just like in it and doing it versus like trying to explain like how I would do that in a session. But
no, I like the technical. That's just me, maybe as a practitioner myself. But Yerasimos, do you want to add to the nervous system question?
No, well, that's Sophie's area of expertise. I mean, I'm trained in it as well, but she described it so articulately.
Thanks.
Yeah, I find it interesting, the riding the wave of bringing it out and then, you know, letting the tension release for a second with putting attention somewhere else. That definitely seems like something that you'd have, that practice would make perfect with, and it's part of the intuitive aspect of your whole process. But getting back more to human design, there's still a couple good questions here. And I really like this one's from my beautiful wifey, Jenny G. She says, well, first, to preface this question, I think this is a really interesting question because I just had this dude on Waters Above, and he was talking about how you can look at entities, non-human entities, that are created by humans through the lens of human psychology and learn something about them. Like the age of an institution being 80 years old is going to behave differently than one that's 15 years old, or things of that nature. And in that sense, you know, people have cast birth charts, astrological birth charts for countries and cities and things of that nature. So what about looking at human design? This is her question. What about looking at a human design chart for the collective? Would you just type in the current date for the human design chart, or is that something that you've considered before? Or is that, I mean, I would guess there's practitioners that are doing something along those lines to be considering ages and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I've considered it just because I'm curious. Like I remember looking into when certain cities or places were incorporated and then like what their card was, from a source card or destiny card standpoint. I was curious. And I'm sure there's an astrological piece to it, but I haven't personally been like, okay, well, the United States, like what time was the Declaration of Independence or whatever the Constitution signed, and looked up the US's human design chart. I haven't done that, I did notice a question before someone mentioned about pets. Like, yeah, you can have different human designs for pets and insects. Their designs just look differently. And our dog's actually a reflector as well, based on that, which is kind of rare. Well, it's the most rare type. But anyways, in terms of the collective or a country or a state, I haven't, because it's not really. I don't really care. It's not super practical to me personally.
I'm curious what you mean by the collective.
I
Like
guess like
humanity?
the world, what's going on for the world as a whole in a given moment, maybe.
I mean,
Or like
there's
the way that people would
transits
Transit.
and
do
things
a
like
chart
that.
for like transit charts for astrology of
Yeah.
what's
Yeah,
transiting
there's
right now.
transit.
It's the same. So in human design, there's also transit charts, or there's things that are happening like right now in the atmosphere and things that are going to be influencing every person. And so you can look at those and sort of see like, oh, that gate got activated this week. And so that's why I'm feeling this extra energy or things like that. Again, I kind of really like to go to like the basics of like, who am I as like my individual person first, and then go out to like, how's my chart being influenced by the transits or by things happening? And then is my chart being interacted with by being around like Yerasimos? How do our charts interact with each other? How is my chart influenced by Rosie, our dog, who's usually, sitting right behind me on these things? Like how are those all interacting? But first and foremost, feeling like your own self. So yeah, you can look up the transit charts and things like that. And I guess that would be more of like, what are the influences on the collective right now that everyone's sort of feeling activated, whether or not they have that always in their chart.
Yeah. The other cool thing too is just in terms of how our chart shifts in relationship. You know what I mean? And so it's just like we have our chart, but yet depending, like Sophie mentioned, depending who we're around, like if someone has the opposite gate and the opposite center that we have activated, then the channel gets activated. So when we're together, that channel's activated and those centers are activated. So, there's obviously different elements to this when exploring it from an interpersonal standpoint. But another main thing that I love about human design is just from the centers. And when you look at the 9 centers, they all represent something different. And wherever you're colored in your chart, that would be considered that's something fixed and reliable in you. And wherever you're white in your chart is where you're a receptor and where you're open to conditioning. And so, our minds, our thinking, our behavior can be distorted based on the conditioning influence that's coming from the white centers. So, for instance, you only have 2 centers colored in. I mean, undefined. You have the head, or the crown, people will call it. That's where inspiration comes from: mental pressure, doubt, confusion, questions. You have it completely open, no gates activated. And then, you also have the mind completely open. So, you could literally say you're completely open minded, but, the mind is, or the ajna center, people call it, the second triangle from the top, that's pretty, I want to say self-explanatory, but it's where concepts, ideas, opinions, insights, like our mental process occurs. And so, there are healthy traits to
So
having.
I'm good. You would think I'm good at picking up somebody else's train of thought.
Well, yeah, the positive is you can take in people, you can kind of reflect back kind of mental clarity to someone. You can take in what they're thinking, almost read their minds, finish their sentences sometimes as well. From the head, you can take inspiration from everywhere, but again, what's the conditioning influence? Like every type has its own not self theme, but every center has its own not self theme, which is highlighting when conditioning is impacting thinking and behavior. And so the not self theme from an open head or undefined head is thinking about things that don't matter. And so one of the questions that you can ask yourself to see if you're being influenced by conditioning is, am I trying to freaking answer everybody's question? You know? And so the key is, like, the healthy trait of having an open mind is like, you're open to inspiration and questions coming from anywhere, anyone, but you're realizing they're not your questions, and you don't need to always spend time and energy on them. You know, you don't need to take on the pressure from other people's needs for answers. You know, you can inspiration from everywhere, but not to become over identified with it or overwhelmed by it, you know? So that's the thing for people that have an open, and most of the population has an open or undefined head, you know? And one of the biggest things is the undefined mind. And it's something that I've had to grapple with, which is the not self theme for undefined mind is pretending to be certain, and literally like having this desire, this need to convince people that you're certain. You know, that's coming from conditioning. It's not coming from a healthy place. And the healthy place is like, you don't need to be certain. Like, you could be okay with saying, I don't know, that like you're more fluid and adaptable, can take things in, and you don't need to be fixed on them or convince everyone and beat them over the head with, I have the answers, I'm right, this, what I've been studying is the truth, you know? And so, you know, again, this is where human design comes into play, and you can look at these different centers and see what do they relate to. And when it's defined in my chart, what does it mean? And when it's undefined, what does it mean? And when the gates, you know, the gates are the numbers that are in the shapes. There's 64 gates. They relate to the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, or the 64 gene keys, 64 genetic codons. And, you know, they're like different roles or personality traits. And then the channels, you know, when they're colored in, when they're activated, they're like other specific sub themes in your life. So anyways, there's levels to this. But another unique thing about human design is getting really clear on how conditioning is impacting our behavior, and very often takes us from really honoring our strategy and our authority, which for me, that's the foundational piece of human design, is especially in the beginning when you're learning. Like, you can go down all these different, what are these symbols and what are these numbers and what is every single gate and what's this and what's that? And it's like, hey, listen, what's your strategy? What's your authority? Can you begin this experiment of exploring that and going, hey, I'm a generator, wait to respond, you know, trusting that I have an open and enveloping aura, and life can come to me, and circumstances and people can come to me. I don't need to force, I don't need to push. And then as I have this kind of open and enveloping aura, then, you know, you have the sacral, which is like, hey, like, yes or no, or you know, if you're a pure sacral authority, you have more truth in the now, unless you're being conditioned, which is a whole nother story. And then I mentioned earlier about the emotional authority, which is waiting out the wave. And so trusting strategy and authority is a huge piece to human design, which I believe differentiates it.
Yeah, I believe that could be the highest value. And luckily, it's not that hard to comprehend, at least about your own chart, in terms of integrating something that is a takeaway and actionable. But I wanted to ask about the open ajna and the open crown. Does that inform you about, or do you think that that's relevant to the fact that in my biofield tuning practice, the avenue of how I find what I'm looking for or come across stuck energy involves me getting like clicks in my ears and pops in my head, and that's where, like, that's literally my guidance system and threshold for knowing something?
It doesn't seem like that wouldn't be the case, you know, like that, like you're completely open from the throat, from the head, and the from the crown. So to be getting hits like that, it makes sense to me. But so if you can feel
I think
free
that's
to
the Jedi thing Braden was asking about.
Yeah, because it's even like
what type of Jedi powers you have
in the open centers or in the open spaces is also, it can also be sort of thought of as it's like where you're the most empathic. So where you're going to feel the other the most. And so you may feel sort of like the energy, as you said, like the dissipation of certain things and stuff like that for you in those areas, because it's where the energy has the most flow. It has the most sort of like option to move as more quickly because you don't have definition there.
Mr. E says his ears pop and ring at different tones when he receives info or downloads. Maybe he's got an open head.
Yeah. I just want to differentiate empathy. I think deals more with the emotional center, but I get what Sophie's saying. It's more about being able to tune in to what's coming and what relates to those centers, the head, tuning into inspiration, tuning into things that are going on in people's mind and getting information from there. And I think the wisdom comes because ultimately it's like, are you operating from a conditioning influence, or have you gained wisdom? Because we gain deep wisdom from our open centers. And so can you discern, hey, like, this relates to me, this doesn't relate to me, and that kind of thing. So
and I used to struggle, starting out in tuning when I was learning what I was doing. I used to struggle with the feeling of uncertainty about the insight I was getting. And I thought, like, well, if I was doing this right, then I would feel certain about it. But what I've learned is that it's a collaborative process between me and the other person. And so I can just present my insights in more of a question, and sometimes even like present it with a range of possibilities and say, like, where did you land? Or like, what's your experience or belief system within this range, or something like this is possible. Tell me what that makes you think of. And then we work with that. So I try to operate more from an uncertainty rather than a certainty. And it actually is better that way. And it allows the other person to collaborate in the pattern recognition rather than, me trying to tell them how it is. And then once we start collaborating in that way, and they tell me what they think it means or what pops into their mind, and then I get their train of thought, then I can really work with that and reshape that. And I can see, like, oh, here's where that's limiting. And so, yeah, the uncertainty thing is actually a really powerful place, at least in the healing practice. And then, of course, in this line of work, if you get too certain about stuff, you're going to run out of things to talk about, or you're going to get stuck just circling the same topic forever without anything new or without actually learning. So that's also a danger.
Yeah, man. And I love what you said about the uncertainty piece as it relates to the open ajna, like you're not just sitting there and being like, I'm the biofield tuner. I'm telling you what it is. I'm certain this is this, which I think many people get stuck in. Many practitioners. And again, I always bring back the example, like, just look around in the world, look around on social media, how many people that are just pretending that they are or like they're needing to convince others that they're certain about certain things. Now, I don't know everyone's individual chart, but I would say, a large percentage of people are operating from the conditioning influence, and that's going to impact how they communicate.
There's also this piece that I wanted to kind of comment on this of, like, there's certain lines. So when we talk about the profile, the lines that I was talking about, 1 through 6, it's like that color the personality traits and stuff. So Chance, you're a 5-1, Yerasimos is a 5-1, I'm a 3-5. And so there's certain lines where there's actually like more of a positive projection field. The 5 line actually carries the highest level of a positive projection field. And so what happens with that is somebody generally will be projecting onto people with the 5 that, put them up on the pedestal, kind of like they know or they have the answer, blah, 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 blah. And so the biggest
back up a second on what you mean by the 5 line?
So if you look at your chart, so when you were asking about the personality side, your personality sun sign, that's 25.5 right there. So that 5 plus when you go to the other side on your design side, it says 58.1. So the 5 and the 1 on your sun part make your profile. Your profile is sort of like an overarching energy that you're bringing forth in the world, and sort of how you may learn things best, or how you may want to disseminate information best. So while all those sort of numbers on the left and right correlate with the gates, then the number 1 through 6 that's after the period, that's going to correlate with these lines that I'm talking about, which are sort of like flavors. So the 5-1 is like a profile. It's a flavoring of you. So the 1 is known as the investigator. It wants to go down all the rabbit holes. It wants to get all the information. It wants to gather as much information as it possibly can. The 5 is what's known as the heretic. The 5 wants to study things that are generally outside of like the mainstream, but then it wants to universalize that energy. So it wants to bring something new into being to a wide mass of people. That makes sense? So each of these lines have a different thing. So like the 2 is known as the hermit. So the hermit is going to have a balance between inner and outer world. And it's also known as like the 2 will have something that it's just genius at. It's just really innately good at. It didn't have to like go to school for or study for or things like that. It's like it was just really good. And the 2 can kind of be this hermit that wants to just sort of like be inside tinkering, learning its own craft and doing its own thing. And the gift is like to come out, give it, and then come back in. And sort of this flow of this hermit of inner and outer life. The 3 is known as the martyr. And so the 3 is also known as like the mistake maker. So I'm a 3-5. So 3 is my, as my personality side of my profile. And so that's how more I identify myself. But it's like it's mistake maker, meaning like the 3 needs to trial and error. It's the person who has to touch the hot stove to know not to touch the hot stove. As many times as you tell them not to touch the hot stove, they still need to touch it. So the 3 is really, the 3 sort of like the lesson is if we're not making mistakes, we're not learning. We're actually out of alignment. If you have a 3 in your profile and you're not making mistakes, there's probably like some perfectionistic conditioning there. The 4 is the opportunist. So that's more of the person who's like connecting up others, and it's more about your inner circle. And your inner circle can be anyone that you meet and have a connection with. It doesn't have to be like your best friend from when you were a child. It can be the person you just met at the grocery store, but you had a connection. And then you can kind of be like, I have this information to give you, or this is the person you need to go to for that information. But it's more sort of personal. Your own inner, like your personal relationships that you want to give information to. Then the 5, as I was saying, is the heretic. It wants to universalize some information into the world, something new into the field. It's usually going against the grain in some way. The 6 is known as the role model. So the 6 is the only one that actually has like a growth in it, of it changes throughout time. So the 6 is from age 0 to 30 would be more of the 3. So it's more of the trial and error. It's trying things, it's making mistakes, it's falling down, it's gaining information through its actual experiential learning. Then from 30 to about 52, it has this second phase of sort of going onto the roof is what it's called. And it's usually sort of this field of, I've been in the muck, I've been making all these mistakes, I've been grappling with things, and now I just kind of want to sit up on the roof or like in a cave and like be the guru. And then after 52, the next phase of the 6 is sort of coming back into the world and kind of being that role model. So it's more of like embodying things that it learned throughout its time and sort of holding this higher wisdom. So these are just profile lines that everyone's going to have. You're going to have a mix of this design and personality side from your sun. But for the 5 also has this extra layer of the 2 also has it, but the 5 has a stronger positive projection field where people might put you up on a pedestal. And so it's really important, not from like a self-degradation place, but from a human place of being like, and I'm human. Yes, I've gained this knowledge, or yes, I have these skills, or yes, I've learned these certain things. And I'm still human, and I'm still learning, and I still make mistakes, things like that. So just that popped into my head, Chance, when you were talking about like you presenting things as like, this is what I'm feeling, or this is what's sort of coming through, and checking on that is sort of holding that vibe of like, yes, I have information. Yes, I know these things. And I'm bringing you in to like confirm or deny what's happening for yourself.
These the chat seems to be really resonating with the the profile lines. That's something I think I've heard about before, but I don't think I was really taken into account even in our last conversation about human design. So
well,
that's
it's weird.
cool.
In our last conversation, the lines didn't come up at all. It was so interesting because I kept having this thought to bring up that you're a 5-1 and to talk about that.
5-1,
and then
bro.
after it closed, I was like, that's so
Investigator
interesting that like,
heretic.
it just didn't happen. But yeah, you two are both 5-1s.
So
bro,
listen, we're 5-1, man. It's just like the one line Sophie, I believe, mentioned. It's like there's an underlying insecurity that all one lines have because it's the first line, and we want to gain the knowledge and the skills to feel secure, and then ultimately we get projected on that we can provide practical solutions. It's all about providing practical solutions to people's challenges as a 5-1, universalizing it. We're actually meant more to work with strangers, actually, too. To impact strangers or people, around. Whereas the 4 line is more about working within people within their networks, like Sophie said. But
so 5-1s are good at podcasts.
What do you say?
5-1s would be good at like holistic health pursuit podcasts or investigating occult or unpopular opinions.
Sure. And like the one again, and this is interesting. I've heard it said in certain ways where it's like, does what you investigate really bring your life forward, or is it serve as a distraction? And I think that's a little bit of a fine line that everyone needs to dance with. Like, what is considered a distraction, or what is considered something that's like serving you, whether it's based on your work or your career or your life. Because it's easy to want to just go down certain paths that maybe, don't serve us. And there's also this.
You want to know what I think?
I don't know everything.
As an answer to that.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I kind of want to respond to that because I know what you're talking about for sure, of spinning your wheels in an investigation that ends up kind of being pointless or going nowhere. And what I like, my understanding of what brings value to my investigations now, and it's kind of a way that I've been able to determine whether or not it's something worth investigating or to make value in something that otherwise would maybe have seemed like there wasn't value there, which is to find the universal truth in it. So that's if something has everything has actually got truth in it somewhere. I mean, in a sense, in nature, right? All nature is truth. And even things that come from the human imagination, for example, like I've done entire shows where I'm decoding like a Marvel comic books movie or TV show, and where it becomes useful rather than just like analyzing the plot and like this character felt this way and this was their development arc, to instead focus on what are the components of the monomyth, what are the zodiacal, astrological, touch points in this fiction that demonstrate that sort of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, using it as a teaching tool to show that people will be able to then recognize those keys to the monomyth in their own symbolic literacy and other things that they're studying or looking at. So my point being, if you can find the universal truth in something that you're investigating, you've found the seeds of value within it, even if it ends up being something that you're not going to pursue in a practical sense. Sure.
Yeah, I know. I hear you, man. Definitely. Yeah, dude, this human design's cool. What can I say?
It is cool.
It's cool.
Gabe wants to know if there's any, if human design and Enneagram mesh very well.
I don't know. I haven't gone too deep into Enneagram besides, I mean, in the past I read a book, I think, and someone gave me a reading, but yeah.
It seems like the profile lines would be something that you might be able to map to the Enneagram, Gabe. I would,
I mean, I don't know. There's 9 in Enneagram, I believe, and 6 lines.
But the Enneagram also has these wings to it where like you're 7 with a 5 wing or what have you. So there might be some overlap or a way to sort of chart those two things together and see the overlap.
What I would say is that with all these different systems, sometimes they share similar stuff, and sometimes each one highlights something new and unique. Like for me, I like the system based on the playing cards. The person I learned them from, Alexander Dunlop. You'd have a good chat with him, man. Bring him on the podcast. His website's thesourcecards.com. I learned about the source cards. Robert Lee Camp calls them the destiny cards. I learned about them like 12 years ago. And there's something very simple and profound in understanding the numerology and the symbology of a deck of playing cards. Like, I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but when you think of a deck of
maybe
playing
a
cards.
long time ago, a little bit, but I'm taking note of this website. This sounds fun.
Yeah, when you think about a deck of playing cards, there's 52 cards in a deck, 52 weeks in a year, 4 suits, 4 seasons, 13 cards in each suit, 13 weeks in each season. If you add up all the cards together with aces being 1 through 10, Jack 11, Queen 12, King 13, they equal 364. Then you have the Joker. The Joker is kind of like the fifth element. You add the Joker plus the 4 suits divided by the original number of suits. That's 1 and a quarter. Plus 364 is 365 and a quarter, which is the amount of days in a supposed solar year. And so depending on the day you're born, you have a primary archetype to play. And then you also have 13 cards, I believe, in your life path, and they each relate to something different based on the placement. And your secondary cards, known as your planetary ruling card, or Alexander calls it the personality card. So again, like, these systems highlight things that are fascinating. And when you look at the 4 suits, the hearts rule the emotional world, the realm of connection, of feelings, of family, of emotions. The clubs rule the mental realm, the realm of knowledge and communication and concepts. And diamonds rule the physical plane, things that could be perceived through our 5 senses. Spades rule the realm of consciousness and belief and visions. And so it's, again, like, we people don't even know where these numbers come from. I mean, Alexander says the pips, the design, the symbols that are on the cards, he traces them back to the flower of life, that they're found within the flower of life. So like, where is this knowledge from? I like to consider, like, a lot of stuff like cheat codes. Cheat codes in life. You gain this knowledge and you understand that there's patterns that support us and that we play out. So yeah, the card system's cool. I like the cards. I like human design. Those are the 2 things that I get down with.
Nice. I think this is a really good question from Machine. He says, what are some ways to protect ourselves from the vampiric energies for natural empaths? So basically, how do empaths survive psychic vampirism? Or thrive?
I'm going to pull, I wouldn't say I'm going to be coming to this from like the strict human design lens. But
sure. Yeah. That's more just a general question.
Yeah. How I feel like I'm relating to this is, like, my dissertation was on the interrelational dynamics of physical contact. So what happens between people when there's physical contact, in terms of not obviously like just the physical stimulation, but like how bodies speak to each other, how energies pass between people. And this really came from being a body worker myself, doing hands-on body work. And then my focus was on asking hands-on body workers about their experience with others, because there seemed to be this trend, as I talked to people as well as in my own experience, where there could be a lot of transfer of energy or a lot of transfer of things between beings. And while my dissertation focused on physical contact, that isn't necessary for those things to be happening, to be transferring. I think it's heightened sometimes in those realms, but it's not necessary. It's happening all the time, as we're porous beings. And we need to be, in order to be able to feel people and care and be in community and have relationship and all of these things. But it is important, and sort of what I came to, sort of what was the sort of end, I'll say, the conclusion, if there was any, to this for my dissertation work, was the more you know yourself, the more you're actually self-aware of, like, what are my somatic sensations? What are signals for me within my body of where I'm on course and where I'm off course, the easier it is for you to notice when you're maybe taking things on from other people, or when something isn't yours that you need to process. One of the biggest questions that I like to ask, just for my own personal hygiene, energetic hygiene, is this mine? And what that signals is my body can then sort of reorient to yes or no on that, and then be able to process it through. I also say to really have like a list of resources that are your personal resources that can kind of ground you, that can clear your energy when you've been around a lot of people. And so that's going to be sort of different for everybody. I will say that natural elements are sort of like a main theme that came up as being really helpful, like water, especially like running water, grounding, touching a tree, even the stability of a rock, and maybe allowing energy to move into the rock from your body and then releasing it. For me, one of the biggest things is I take a shower every single night before I go to bed to like clean my own energy. Rose water can be really helpful with this as well. And it's also like your own energetic boundaries of like, I have an intention when I'm going to be in session with people, or just in general in the world, of like, I only take in what's for the highest good of all concerned, keeping in mind all unique destinies. So for me personally, what is mine and what's for my highest good, that's fine for me to take on from other people if for whatever reason it's for my highest good, keeping in mind my unique destiny. So again, I don't think that we're supposed to be these sort of like walled off, complete, isolated beings. We are porous. We are energetically interacting with those around us and the world. But sort of holding that boundary that I'm only allowing in what's right for me. And then I can process that for myself. And then allowing what isn't to move off in the ways that it needs to, like taking a shower, breath work, grounding, running water over my hands or my arms, touching the tree, hugging a tree, and asking for it to take on what it can from my being. Things like that. But I think the more seated, the more grounded you are in yourself, in your own body, in your own being of like, what is me? That's going to help you feel more of when you've taken on other people's things.
I really like the grounding element as well. And it sounds like you're describing making a sort of agreements with self that are pre-programmed decisions, right? Because Machine's talking about here, he just brought up that he'll sometimes feel someone's sad thoughts coming in as a pulsing of bad thoughts of my own. And I notice that it happens when I'm not thinking about my problems at all. So one thing that might help with that is to actually create an agreement with yourself that says, mind, I know that we have the capacity to take on other people's thoughts and be sensitive to them, but maybe there's an on and off switch that you can create that says, I'm no longer willing to accept the thoughts, the negative or downtrodden thoughts from people around me into my own thought field. So turning off. And then maybe at other times you might want to turn it back on. And then there's, in terms of feeling, there's like different levels of psychic vampirism, right? There's the direct personal relationship of certain friends, or more profoundly being in a toxic relationship of romantic type, where the psychic vampirism can be the most feeling of a beatdown. And I think we all have different, I really like the, actually Dunlop's car, in the cards thing that you showed me, because I just looked at mine for a second and I realized like, oh yeah, hey, I've actually got this as a particular vulnerability that I had to learn about and overcome in life, which is, feeling sort of beat down by other people's hard feelings in a relationship or whatever, feeling victimized by a romantic partner, which I'm totally past that at this point. But the key is to like really look for, do I accept that something's being done to me, or am I in a story where I'm the good one and they're the bad one or the trouble one? And that's another place to draw boundaries, is like, don't accept configurations in relationships where there's no choice for you other than to see yourself as the good one and them as not the good one. And that's going to help a lot. And then the other side of psychic vampirism is like out in the world. It's maybe not as common all the time. But there are actual like legit energy vampires that kind of know what they're doing, and they have moves. So there's a book I really like by Joel Slate. It's called Psychic Vampirism, and I wouldn't be able to recall off the top of my head, it's been years since I read it, all of the tells, but there are certain tells. For example, if you're like at a party, or you just meet somebody like at the park or, at a grocery store. And if you especially be aware of this, mindful of this with meeting somebody for the first time, because there's a certain type of vampire attack that's more dramatic where they feel like they can get away with it because they're probably not going to see you again. rather than the long game plan of psychic vampirism in a more permanent relationship in your life usually wouldn't be this dramatic necessarily. But there's tells like they might be really close to you for some suspiciously, especially if they're the opposite gender, or even like touch you. They are going to act really interested in whatever you have to say, and no matter what you're saying, they're going to be like, "Yes, I'm into that too," and affirmative, and like be like it's a flag when they are too into it. Like no matter what you say, they're into it. And usually like this is one tactic I've seen before, I've experienced before, but that's you letting them in when you get jazzed up about them being so affirmative to you. And then what happens is you'll say another thing, and then they're just gonna like come down on you like you're completely wrong and here's why, and they're gonna like eviscerate you verbally or something like that, or especially in front of a group of other people. Like they might be really affirmative to you in person, and then you're in a circle talking, and they just like all of a sudden attack you in a way that you weren't expecting because you thought they were on your side. And that's when you're going to feel the drain. Like if you feel like all of a sudden it's hard to form a sentence, or your thoughts get really muddled and you're like confused, that's the sign of getting juiced. And it doesn't mean you're less or like you're damaged, but that's the moment to first of all just leave the situation. You're not going to like fight back against this type of person. You need to just not be around them. And then to follow a lot of the things Sophie talked about with grounding, or things that energetically rejuvenate you and replenish you. That's all I got to say on it for now. Yeah. But there's definitely they definitely will yes man you, and that's a bait, as Machine is saying.
Yeah. There's a book that I'm looking for that has a lot of energetic hygiene tips in it. And so just give me a second while I look for that. But you guys talk amongst yourselves and I'll try to find it.
Well, we're going to start to land this plane, as they say. That's cool.
It's totally cool, man. Dude, I really appreciate hanging out, man. It's been a bit.
Yeah, this has been an awesome stream.
Yeah. Good peeps chiming in. Thanks for listening. You guys are cool. Hopefully we can connect at some point in the future. If we're ever at an event, just come up and say what's up.
Yeah. And Sophie and Yerasimos get around, especially if you guys go to Music and Sky, the Alpha Vedic event, Mike Winter's thing.
Yeah.
You guys are going to be there, right?
Yeah, we'll be there. Sophie's doing a talk on the nervous system. I'm actually going to be there with Joel. We're going to be on stage together for the first time giving a talk. And Joel's actually performing. He's been working a lot on music, so he's performing new tracks from his not yet released album, exclusive for the Music and Sky community. So,
oh, cool!
Some conscious, badass hip hop.
Catch up with Joel again soon.
Yeah, so we're really excited for that.
Nice. Will you ever, if you're ever in with an event and they seem like they could use some more speakers or something, I've always got stuff to say.
Oh, totally, dude. Totally, man.
That would be a good way to get me to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Be invited.
I just wanted to say, Cindy Dale, Energetic Boundaries, How to Stay Protected and Connected in Work, Love, and Life.
Is that her really big book, or is that a different? Is that just another book she has? I remember.
She has a couple, but I can't remember. It's not super big.
Yeah, I'm thinking of something else then.
Regular book. But that one can be really helpful if you're looking for energetic boundary info.
The other one I was talking about is Psychic Vampires by Joel H. Slate. Mm-hmm. That's a interesting one because he did a lot of he approached it more scientifically, and he was doing like aura photography of like before and after a vampire juiced somebody, and interviewing like self-proclaimed energy vampires who had techniques and were doing it on purpose. There's like a whole, I'm laughing, but mostly because it's like kind of creepy, but there is an actual subculture of occultists who, you go Google this topic, you're just as likely to find books telling you how to do it rather than
totally
how to defend against it.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. So it's not made up. But yeah, remind people where they can find you and all that, and how they can work with you guys.
Sophie, you can start.
Sure. You can find me at sophiefletcherphd.com. It's a pretty simple website. I made it. But you can contact me through there. I'm also on Instagram as sophiefletcher.phd. And I'm happy to, get contact through there as well. I do sessions of human design readings, as well as somatic, nervous system, trauma work. And then I'm also a sort of co-coach in Yerasimos's group coaching program called Rise Above the Herd. And then I'm also a nervous system. I hold a monthly nervous system call within Yerasimos and Joel's Here for the Truth, Friends of the Truth member community, where they have a lot going on, which Yerasimos will talk about. But yeah, and I love talking about this stuff. I really love teaching on it, as well as doing personal sessions. I love doing, Chance. I'm so grateful for the invitation as a projector, to get invited and recognized and brought on to these things. So I love, doing podcasts, doing live things, just chatting about all this stuff. That's really where my juicy energy is at the moment. So I'm really grateful. Thank you so much. And I love your work. And as we said, I've had the buyer field tuning sessions, and I think they're absolutely freaking awesome. And I think Chance really embodies his cross of healing. So thank you. Yerasimos, what do you?
God, I love my wife. She's so amazing and beautiful. So grateful.
She's high vibing.
Yeah, I love it.
You better be good.
For me, you can go to hereforthetruth.com. That's the website I have with Joel. That's our main podcast website, but also on there, it lists everything else we're up to. We have our group coaching program, Rise Above the Herd. We're on our 9th run of that now. I'm not sure when we're going to do our 10th run. Friends of the Truth is our membership community. We do 6 calls a month, 2 community calls. Like Sophie said, a nervous system tune-up call. We have an evolutionary astrology call led by Sarah DeHaven, and we have a German New Medicine study group by Melissa Gray, who's a student of human design. And we have a cool Telegram community. And then I give human design readings exclusively in our Rise Above the Herd group coaching program, but I've decided, because I miss it and I've done it for so long, I've decided to open up giving human design readings again, one-on-one, to anyone that's interested, whether you're completely new or you know a little bit about it and want to just maybe utilize human design to get clear on some specific challenges you're facing. So, you can hit me up on hereforthetruth.com through the email, or I have a link. I'll give it to Chance to go directly to like a place to check out and to schedule with me. So I'll send that to him, and then he can do whatever he wants to do with it. But other than that, I'm so grateful to you, man. And this is what I love about individuality is we're doing our thing. Each one of us, we're doing our thing. We're adding a piece of the puzzle, and we're being ourselves as best as we can. And there's nothing that excites me more than seeing people live their bliss, do the thing that they love doing, and ultimately embodying the person that they were born to be in this lifetime. And it's been a mission of mine.
Me too.
Yeah, it's been a mission of mine.
That's my jam.
Yeah, man, to support people in that journey. Ultimately, it's an individual journey, and you are the authority of your life. And there are teachers, there are mentors, there are people that can support you to come back to yourself even more and get dialed in. So thanks for having us on, man. I appreciate you. And Yeah.
And
we'll
awesome to see. I feel like you called her Jen, but in the chat, Jenny. I don't know which one she prefers.
Technically, it's Jennifer.
Jennifer. Okay.
She goes by all of the above.
I know we didn't get to like meet you on here, but lovely to see your comments and all of that pop up. So thanks for being here. Lovely to sort of meet you a little bit on here at least.
You guys think that she's cool in the live chat? You should meet her in person for sure.
Totally.
As we're wrapping up, I'll remind everyone you can check out my biofield tuning services at the InnerVerse, innerversepodcast.com/sound-healing. It's going to be linked in the description of every show. And I'm also going to do a little preview to finish us off tonight, where Dylan and I are back with a vengeance for our exclusive to members only Inner World podcast, episode 4. And this is going to be just chock full of amazing information that will get you rethinking your entire view of history. It was a fun one. You can subscribe on my Patreon, or you can become a member through the YouTube membership option, or you could join Dylan's Substack. Those are the ways that you can get access to it. So I'm going to play the intro clip that I edited this morning that is for that episode. And that'll be how we finish off. Thanks, Yerasimos, Sophie. Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Too, and being here.
Yeah, wasn't that cool? I'm all stoked because I listened to that over and over while I was editing the clip. But essentially, it's about the historical forgeries that came about during the Renaissance. And a lot of what we think we know about classical antiquity, especially the Roman history and the ancient Greeks, might be based on forged material. So that's a really interesting thread to pull on. Can't wait to share that with you guys for the members. And I'll catch you guys later. Have a good one.